I'm live. Hello. Good afternoon. Mike Banner here for the next episode of 62 Who Knew. We played a repeat last week. It was one of our best. I hope you enjoyed it. I was a little under the weather, but I am back now at full speed, which with what I think really and truly, although with all the exciting shows that we have had since the first week of January of this new year of 2021, I'm going to say, you're going to hear some announcements, some current news events from our friend, Mr. Richard Enslein, from the Weizmann Institute in Israel. He has been on before, but what we're going to be discussing tonight is world-changing. Now, changing things in the world, that's not different for the Weizmann Institute. They've been doing that for the last century. But you're going to hear things tonight that are incredible. And, of course, joining us also is one of our favorites, Mr. Stephen Sless, head of the Sless Group, and one of the foremost reverse mortgage experts in the country, because anytime we want to talk about something that does affect seniors, and we are going to be talking about something that like that today, we always want to get Stephen's input on this and how it can affect the world that him and I live in, the reverse mortgage world, and our favorite section of people to take care of, and that would be people getting ready to enter retirement or people that are already in retirement. So I don't want to waste any time at all. I'm going to give a quick synopsis, as I always do, about our show. 62 Who Knew was created. What is this, our 104th episode, John? 104th episode, okay. This was created 104 weeks ago. 62 Who Knew, the entire premise of 62 Who Knew is to discuss the double-edged sword, if you wish, the mixed blessing of longer lifespans. Although lifespans itself has not raised that much in the last 15 to 20 years, but because of modern science, technology, and all types of medical breakthroughs, all types of vaccines, which is the word of the year, the truth of the matter is, if you make it to 62 in this country, and notice I didn't say make it healthy, just make it to the age of 62 in this country, you have a 50-50 shot of making it to your early 90s. You have to think about that. If you make it to 62, you have a 50-50 shot of being here half the time, 30 years, that you've already been here. And the truth of the matter is, less than 1% of this great country has the financial capability of living those 30 years that's supposed to be retirement, your best years, financially, with a good quality of life. They need help. Here I am 6 weeks away from my 63rd birthday, still writing mortgages, hosting a TV show. 1% of the country, a little less, is rich enough to retire at 62 and live those 30 years. The rest of us have to figure out how. And that exactly is what 62 Who Knew is. Every week we endeavor to bring you experts on the incredible topic of long-term care insurance, in-home care, Medicare, Medicaid, life insurance, reverse mortgages, annuities versus the stock market, what type of Medicare is best for you, vacation, health. We have tried very hard to bring experts in to become the nation's leading source of information for you as you approach retirement, or maybe with you already be in retirement. But again, who knew at 62? We have another 30 years to go. And based on the scientific and medical research of the Weizmann Institute, which is represented tonight here on the show, that 90 might very well be turning into the 100 or hundreds in the very near future in our lifetime. And since our viewership audience has grown to between 80 to 100,000 viewers per week and growing, thank you, Stephen Sless, I would assume that this theory of 62 Who Knew is going over well because we continue to grow. So without any further ado, let us bring up our two guests. And there they are, coming from us lower, well, my lower right could be your lower left, one of our absolute regulars and favorites, national reverse expert and commentator, and every now and then guest host of the 62 Who Knew television show, Mr. Stephen Sless. Thank you for being with us, Stephen.
Always a pleasure. You know that. Great to be back with you today, especially for this show. I know this one was going to be big, and when you reached out to tell me what this topic was, it was one that I couldn't miss.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though it really has nothing to do with reverse mortgages, my God.
It's bigger. It's bigger than anything that you and I discuss on a daily basis.
It really is. And now the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that is just too sweet to be sour. I don't know why I turned you into Dusty Rhodes from Worldwide Wrestling. I don't know why I did that. But Mr. Richard Enslein, who has been with us before. He was with us the first month this show ever existed. Every time you come on, sir, and talk about the latest progresses and projects of the Weizmann Institute, people just go crazy. And you're one of the reasons we do have, so many viewers on this show. So welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
Well, before we actually get into the nuts and bolts, I always explain the backgrounds of my guests, but the truth is, I wouldn't do service to try to explain what the Weizmann Institute has given to this world in the last, I can't say decade, in the last century. So for our viewers, and there are many of them that maybe have never seen you before, or maybe very possibly and probably never heard of the Weizmann Institute, give us a little summary of what the Weizmann Institute has done and some of its accomplishments over the last century.
Sure, Michael. As we get started, I want to let everybody know that I am a national vice president with the American Committee for the Weizmann Institute. We are the fundraising arm for the Weizmann Institute, which is located in Rehovot, Israel. It's about half hour by car southeast of Tel Aviv. It was established in 1934 by Dr. Chaim Weizmann, who was a great accomplished chemist, who was also the chemist for the British Admiralty during World War I. He invented smokeless gunpowder from acetone. He held over 100 patents. And in 1934, with the help of the Seif family, he established the first building at the Weizmann Institute in Rehovot, Israel. Today, there are 3,800 scientists on the campus every day, graduate students, research technicians on a beautiful 300-acre campus. It's basic science. It's biology, chemistry, biochemistry, physics, computer mathematics. It does not have a hospital. It does not offer law degrees or any other, it's not even a university. It doesn't have any undergraduate, but it has a graduate school that gives out degrees in Masters of Science, PhDs, and postdoctoral work. And the postdoctoral students 68% of them come from countries around the world because they want to learn the great hallmarks of this curiosity-based, multidisciplinary, collaborative institute. In 2020, Leiden University of the Netherlands ranked Weizmann Institute number 8 worldwide among a research quality among 1,000 institutions. Weizmann is the only non-American institution in the top 8. And Nature magazine, where all the scientists in the world strive to be published, ranked Weizmann number 2 in the world in institutions of its equal size. They collaborate with hospitals worldwide when they get into clinical trials. They're in the Pasteur Institute in France, the National Institute of Health, MD Anderson, Oxford, Yale, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Memorial Sloan Kettering. So as we speak, there are clinical trials and different things that are going on
Give us a couple,
simultaneously.
if you would, just if you would, of some of the things that we deal with when we're sick, normal people, on a daily basis. If you just a few examples.
Okay, so when you watch TV and you see commercials for Humira, there are 7 of the top 25 selling drugs in the world have its origins at the Weizmann Institute. And Humira, for instance, was licensed to Abbott Labs. Enbrel, you see Phil Mickelson, who just won the PGA tournament. He's saying, oh, my arthritis is gone. He takes Enbrel. You see the commercial on TV. And then you see Amgen. That drug was licensed to Amgen from Weizmann. Frontline treatments for multiple sclerosis, such as Copaxone, Avonex, Rebif, have its origins at the Weizmann Institute of Science. Erbitux to treat head, neck, and colorectal cancer. Vicivitux for metastatic colorectal cancer, and on and on and on. So in the pharmaceutical world, and Weizmann is involved in many, many other things other than pharmaceuticals, they have their origins at Weizmann. Weizmann is granted, not applied for, but granted an average of 2 patents a week.
Wow.
In 2019, from the last statistics that I have, 140 new patents were awarded to the Weizmann Institute. And in 2019, $35.5 billion of global sales of products based on Weizmann research left the state of Israel.
Unbelievable.
So there are many, many things. When you use your ATM card in the bank, the algorithms that protect the encryptions, Weizmann mathematicians were part of that research. And there are many, many other things that we use on a daily basis that come from the Weizmann.
Well, and I don't want to belabor this, but it's something that you said the first time we ever spoke, and it gave me the chills, and it still sort of gives me the chills. I had assumed, being in Israel, that the great majority of your doctors and scientists and researchers would be Jewish in Israel. I was wrong about that, and I remember what you said, and please tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm misquoting, but I think it was I think I told this to you maybe in the past, Stephen. You said to us on the first show you were at, here at Weizmann, we don't care the shape of your eyes. We care about the size of your brain.
Well, that oversimplifies it, but yes, as I said, 68% of the postdoc students come from other countries. And many of them, as they get to be postdocs, they're in their early 30s, they will meet somebody invariably in Israel, marry, and a lot of them have stayed. So you can go on campus at any time and find scientists from China, from Japan, I've met them from Holland, from Argentina, from South Africa. I see every shape of eye, every color of skin. There's tremendous diversity on campus, and they celebrate diversity. They just celebrated it recently on campus, even during the conflict that just passed. They celebrated the diversity. There are scientists on campus who are Muslim, that grew up on the West Bank. Mm-hmm. It all has to do with, as you said, the size of their brain, but to what their accomplishments are scholastically and what they have to offer. So you don't have to be Jewish to go study in Israel and to live in Israel and to be part of this great institution. Absolutely not.
Stephen, before I start any specific questions, do you have any questions about the Weizmann Institute?
I'm still blown away by the number of patents that are being issued. I think most organizations and most research firms struggle to get one or two patents in their lifetime of being an organization, and 150 plus in the past year. I mean, it's mind-boggling, the work that's being done there.
Oh, and we're only covering a fraction of it. We could easily do 2 or 3 shows on the Weizmann Institute. And I want to get into a few things, and actually I'm going to leave COVID-19 for the last one. The last time you were here, Richard, you told us about some very promising studies in stage 1 about possibly being very close to the cure of Alzheimer's. And I know that has taken some giant leaps since the last time you were here, and I'd love you to explain that to us.
Well, I'd be happy to. Recently, for our supporters, we did a webinar that we presented that I could share with anybody. I have a hyperlink to it that you could hear it from yourself, what I'm about to tell you. But for the last 20 years, one of the scientists at Weizmann, who I've had the pleasure to see in Israel and has worked with me here in the U.S., her name is Professor Michal Schwartz. And she had launched a phase 1 clinical trial trying to prove that she can cross the blood-brain barrier. And in mice, she was able to reverse dementia. And she did this with experiments that she showed with young mice in a pool of water with a dive platform. And mice hate water and they want to get out of the water. And the older mice, when they put them in the water, they couldn't find their way out. And the older mice that they treated, and I'll get into how she did it, were able to find their way out of the water. So that was a stage 1 clinical trial, Michael, that I'd spoken to you about. Since then, they've proved the concept in warm-blooded animals, specifically in monkeys. And now they've applied to the FDA and the EMA, that's the European Medical Association, for the right to do these trials in human beings. And we expect to start these trials by the end of this calendar year. So how does she do this? For the last 20 years in her research, Michal was trying to prove that you can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is a membrane that's in the back of our necks, and it protects the blood that's crossing into the brain, not to bring viruses and bacteria that will cause our brains not to work the way they should. And the dogma from scientists around the world was that you could not cross this blood-brain barrier. But through the cerebrospinal fluid and working with the immune system, Michal found a way to cross the blood-brain barrier and to supercharge our immune systems with a proprietary antibody called IBC-AB002, a little bit too much technical information, but they developed a biopharma company called Immunobrain Checkpoint that uses this proprietary antibody to enhance the immune system and induce the brain repair process. So I've oversimplified it. Right. I hope you were able to understand completely what I just said. When you go back into what you hear about now in cancer, when you hear about immunotherapy treatments.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to explain.
Started with a paper that was written in the 1980s at the Weizmann Institute, and now today regularly certain leukemias and multiple myelomas are successfully treated, which were death sentences before. They can be successfully treated using supercharging the immune system. So she's using the same theory of methodology, that it's our immune system. And to oversimplify it, the reason why we age is our immune systems weaken. So think about it rationally, that there is a connection there to dementia, to the aging brain. So this is where she's gone. It's now in a company. In my open, I failed to mention that Weizmann has one of the largest technology transfer companies that's also on campus. It's called YEDA, Y-E-D-A. In Hebrew, YEDA means knowledge. And YEDA is the company that licenses the intellectual property of the Weizmann Institute to companies and corporations all over the world. It is one of the largest technology transfer companies in the world. Some years ago, Harvard went and hired away at the time head of Weizmann's YEDA to head their technology transfer. So, in the academic world, it's very well done.
Richard, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't know what immunotherapy is, and I have a feeling many of our viewers do not know. So could we take it just a step backwards and tell us what is immunotherapy? I know it has greatly helped my nephew with his cancer. I read about it, but I only look for it because you told me those words. Can you tell people what this staggering new technology of treating cancer?
There are certain drugs that have been invented that supercharge the immune system in specifics. So in blood cancers, they're using specific drugs that are different drugs, but maybe cousins to it in the chemistry of the drug. So for instance, in blood cancers, they're using drugs like Keytruda that you hear about on television. You see commercials, and they're using combinations of drugs to supercharge our immune system. So the immune system could be lax and not recognizing the cancer cells and therefore not attacking them. In certain viruses, like the virus that's caused our pandemic, the virus can conceal itself from our immune system, which is why it's not, our immune systems aren't killing it on contact. So to keep it simple, simplistic without getting into great chemistry, there are new drugs that have been invented by some of the major pharmas that are enabling our immune system to recognize the invaders that they're not seeing, to be able to kill these pathogens and these cancer cells. So it's the whole basis of how our bodies work. We have white blood cells, as you know, that'll ward off certain bacteria that keep us from being sick. And now scientists around the world have found different ways to supercharge the immune system to protect our bodies. And that's basically what this new vaccine is doing, this new RNA vaccine. But that's another right. Subject that's a little more detailed.
Richard, this is Steve. Just a quick question that comes to mind. We saw with the COVID-19 vaccine the advanced timeline, right? I mean, normal vaccine taking, 3 to 5 years or longer. I think the vaccine was developed in 9 or 10 months. And so all politics, of course, aside, what does that mean? Did that set a new precedent for this type of research being fast-tracked to come up with cures? Or are we still looking at 8, 10, 15 years down the road for a potential cure to dementia, ALS, and that sort of thing?
There's even more, Stephen. There's even more that I haven't shared with Michael. About a month ago, the American Committee of the Weizmann Institute put on a webinar with Dr. Michael Dolston, who's the chief scientific officer of Pfizer, who was involved with his group in inventing the Pfizer vaccine. Dr. Dolston did part of his education and his postdoctoral at the immunology department at the Weizmann Institute of Science. So he is a Weizmann alum, so to speak. So are a lot of the scientists that were at Moderna. A number of their scientists who were doing the research had done their immunology training at the Weizmann Institute during their postdoctoral period. And at the end of the call, when people like yourself were able to type in the chat room their questions, one of the questions they asked Dr. Dolston is, what are you working on now? And during the call, he put on one of his friends that he collaborated with, a doctor at the NIH. I can't recall his name right now. And they said, what are you gentlemen working on now? And they said, now that we have the first RNA vaccine for COVID-19, we're using the RNA methodologies that we've used, and we're working on a vaccine for cancer. Think about that for a minute.
Unbelievable.
It absolutely blew my mind when he said it. They've been able to understand more of the pathways. And Michael, I'm going to use this as a segue without us having pre-discussed this.
It's okay.
Tell you a little bit more about microRNAs.
Yes, please.
So they were once thought to be the garbage around our genes. But as it turns out, they're actually a treasure, microRNAs. Tiny strands of RNA which control the expression of our genes. They are, in fact, intricately involved in nearly all aspects of regulating the lives of the cells that play roles in all human diseases. At Weizmann, Professor Ron Hornstein's research is bringing these short RNAs into the spotlight, showing, for example, that certain microRNAs are crucial for the survival of motor neurons. When these fail to function, the result may be amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, a devastating motor neuron disease that gradually robs its victims of movement. So they found that there's an enzyme called dicer that's failing. And to fast track, Michael, where I'm going with this, there is now a clinical trial that's been signed at McGill University in Montreal to take this research to the next level into clinical trials. So when I said to you on the phone that there's new hope now for ALS, this is exactly what I was talking about. And it comes down now to this tiny treasure of microRNAs. So again, as I said in my open, basic science is finding new knowledge. I had some years ago the pleasure of traveling with another scientist who works in the immunology department, who was a doctor at St. Margaret's Hospital in Toronto, and he went back to being, he was an oncologist, and he went back for his PhD, and he wanted to be a researcher. And I was driving in the car with him. I said, why would you do that? You make so much money as a doctor. You don't make much money as a researcher at Weizmann. It's a government-controlled salary. And he answered me, I sat at the bedside of my patients suffering from these terrible blood cancers. And generally, we had the same result. We treated them the same way for 20 years, and they all died. Now he's gone on to find that the stem cells that will cause these cells in our bodies to mutate and to have the problem where we end up with a blood cancer start 10 years before you will have any signs of the cancer. And he's gone on to find now ways to change, and he's investigating ways to change these cells before they mutate. So he embodied it. He basically said, why are we doing the same things with the same outcome? Everybody dies. We need to do something different. And this is what basic science is. It's finding new knowledge, going to find new things. And the fortitude that these people have is incredible because they can run thousands and thousands of failed experiments before they find the answer. In 2009, Professor Adeyunath won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, finding the structure and the function of the ribosome, which is the protein-making factory of our bodies. And when speaking with her in Israel in 2010, she told me she had 25,000 failed experiments over the course of 20 years. So she found the answer. Today, understanding how the ribosome works is the key to, it's the protein-making factory of our bodies. It was the key component of this knowledge of being able to form these new vaccines. So one science builds on the other,
Right.
and it takes years and years of these really brilliant people who have the academic freedom at Weizmann to follow what they want. They're not told to go find the cure for breast cancer or the cure for ALS, but rather, what is your question? What do you want to solve? And that's the interview. They know what their grades are when they come to see the leadership at Weizmann, but they ask them, what's your question? Where do you want to go? What do you want to find? And they look for the people to have not only the mental capacity, but they also look to see if they'll have the fortitude to stick with it for the time it takes to get there. It's a very, very special place, and I would urge anyone listening that when they're in Israel to contact us. There's a visitor center, and we'll be happy to show you some of it. Questions?
Stephen, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
I have 5 or 6 questions that have come to mind.
I got one, but I'll save mine. Go ahead.
I'll start with let's go with my top 2, right? So as you're speaking, Richard, what comes to mind is, had it not been COVID-19, had COVID-19 not struck the world in the awful way that it did and still continues to, would a lot of these advances in this research and technology be possible today? Or was it COVID-19 that brought to light this new way to create vaccines? And from that, even though COVID-19 was this awful,
they were studying
terrible
this long before COVID-19 was not the catalyst. The immunology department was studying RNA, and protein studies been going on for years. There's a whole science of proteins called the science of proteomics, which means the study of proteins. And this has been going on for decades. And knowledge stacks on itself. They find one thing, then they find another thing, and it builds. In Michal Schwartz's talk, which I could share with you, she talked about 15 of her graduate students are now in major labs in different cities in different countries around the world. So,
incredible.
So the answer is no. What changed with the pandemic, with COVID-19, 65 labs at Weizmann switched over to do COVID-19 research, and they were doing something called open research to try to make this happen in the time frame that it happened. So normally a scientist will write papers, get them published so that they're credited for the knowledge that's out there, and then they'll go to patent, which could take a long time, as you know, to patent their molecule, whatever their findings were, and then they share the information with the rest of the world. The Weizmann scientists in COVID went to what's called open research. And they put their research out there before patenting and before publishing. And they shared it with other labs around the world. That went on with other labs in the world, labs like at Oxford, or at the Max Planck in Germany, or the Pasteur in France, or Memorial Sloan Kettering, or the NIH. The scientists were sharing openly the information when it came to COVID-19. And in my personal opinion, that's what pushed the vaccine to be done within a year.
Imagine
They
if
weren't
the
looking
world,
to make money. They were looking to solve the problem.
imagine if the world could actually operate like that, not just in a pandemic. I know I'm getting on a soapbox here, but
Well, it costs a lot of money to run these labs and to have these different great institutions around the world. So hypothetically, that would be great, but that's not reality.
yeah, I know.
It costs money to turn on the lights.
I have a question, and then Steve has a few more, I know. With human trials beginning, by the end of this year, I'm back to the cure for Alzheimer's. How long do those trials usually go on? And then the next part of that question would be, is that when you go to the FDA for approval? I mean, are we still a decade away from seeing a cure?
We've gone to them for approval to do the trials in humans. A decade away? Hopefully not. To try to answer your question more succinctly, so let's say the clinical trials start in January on humans, and they have to then find the people who are willing to participate in the trial. I'm sure they'll do open and blind trials.
Right.
And they'll have to report the findings to the FDA, and then it takes time for them to rule on their finding and then to go to the process. So it could take some years to get where you have an approved drug or methodology to the public. But what's major here is she's proved her theory. She's proved that, and it's been proved in cancer research, that to oversimplify it, to supercharge our own immune systems, we can defeat a lot of this. So you talked about at the beginning of your show, Michael, about how long we live now. How long will we live when we can master this?
Well,
live well?
That could be. Stephen and I have talked about this many times, thanks to the Weizmann Institute, and let's give credit where credit is due, other institutes throughout the world that
Absolutely.
I'm not fortunate enough to be familiar with. What is going to happen? And Stephen and I discuss this all the time, when the average age is 100 or 110. This brings a world, just a plethora of other problems. I mean, from food shortages to medicine shortages to here in Florida, the retirement capital of the United States of America, there's already a shortage for senior housing. There's a shortage for health care people. There's a shortage for in-home care people. What's going to happen when we're living another 20, 30 years? So that's I won't even say that's a show, Stephen. That's a series of shows for us. But being, I think, the oldest, am I the oldest person on the, usually I am.
No, compared to me, you're a baby.
Oh, okay. Well, I like that. Can you be a regular? Because I'm usually the oldest person on the show.
I'm 74.
Okay. Well, you don't look it. It's all those secret drugs you're getting from Israel. I think you look younger now than 100 shows ago when you first came on. So something's going on here. Stephen, we got to find out his secret. But I think in our lifetime, Stephen and I and you at 74, we're going to see this, that 90 is just, I won't say 90 will be the new 60, but 90 might be the new 75 in 10 years. And I know you mentioned something else, and I don't want to take away from Stephen's questions because this is his first introduction really to the Weizmann Institute. But you had mentioned that other scientists, you said, one science leads to another, one discovery leads to another. I think on the last time that you were on the show, you spoke about when we were talking about removing plaque from the brain, which was part of the science of curing Alzheimer's, that led to a different part of Weizmann that said, wait a minute, if we can remove plaque from the brain, can't we remove it from your major arteries, which could prevent strokes and heart attacks and literally have people living to be 110 or 120. Did I misinterpret that?
Now, we won't have time to get into it on this show tonight, but one of the scientists at Weizmann has found a molecule called agrin that they found that babies can repair heart muscle tissue from birth till 8 days. But when we have a heart attack, we get scar tissue, and as you know, it doesn't repair itself.
Right.
Now they're investigating this molecule agrin to see if they can repair heart damage after heart attacks. I don't know where that's going to lead. So to answer your question, they're also working on new hybrids of foods and new ways to grow the food. And I'm sure you've seen the different tiered greenhouses where they have one level above the other. So they're going to produce more food from a smaller amount of the earth. They're working on these problems. They're looking to create fuels they've been working on from algae. So, we hear all things about the batteries and the cars. There's lots of other research that's going on that can possibly solve these problems. So it all comes back to getting brilliant people together and giving them their freedom scholastically to follow their curiosity and to do collaborative research. Because at Weizmann, it's the norm, not unusual, to have a computer scientist in the lab with a biologist with a PhD in physics. They collaborate in the life sciences, and they put all this knowledge together to get to these new discoveries.
Stephen, isn't it just amazing? I mean, you and I, without patting ourselves on the back, try to be humble about this, we're of reasonable intelligence, I have to say, you and I, okay? I mean, I'm not going to split an atom in the near future, but I consider myself a fairly smart individual, and you and I can't figure out how to get the public to believe that the reverse mortgage lender doesn't take their house, even though it's against the law for them to do that. And then there's a group of people sitting over there trying to bring our lifespans to 120 and doing tens of thousands of experiments on a molecular level. It sort of makes me feel like I should be swinging from a tire, on a tree with that I should have an abacus going, what am I doing here? It really is just staggering to think about, isn't it?
It is mind-blowing. It's just completely mind-blowing. But I think Richard hit on, something that you and I have been doing for quite some time in our little reverse mortgage world, and that's collaborating, right? We try to get the smartest people together. We know that the two of us, we are, of course, of reasonable intelligence, to use your own words, but we're not, if we're the smartest ones in the room, we're in the wrong room.
That's for sure.
It is collaborating with the researchers in our industry, the Wade Fowles, the Jamie Hopkins. Look, this is a different type of research, right? I don't want to compare financial and retirement research to the work that the Weizmann Group is spearheading. But collaborating and involving the smartest people and just sharing ideas and different ways to do things. And we've seen what a difference that's made in our industry, and look at what it's doing on a far grander scale. And it's that autonomy, when you let the creative minds be the creative minds and you give them the autonomy. And we saw what could happen, with the COVID vaccine when you just say, there's bigger issues at stake than making money. And even though that's important, right? It's what makes the world go round. But when you put money and politics aside and you just focus on the things that really matter, what can really be possible and what can be achieved. It's incredible. I do have a couple burning questions.
No,
Richard.
go ahead.
So
we still got time. We're good.
So what about people that already have cancer or that already have ALS or Alzheimer's? Is this technology, is there research on reversing some of these things, or is this more preventative, treatments? And then my second part to this question is, so the Alzheimer's Association is a cause that I've gotten passionately behind. I'm a big, I'm on the board locally here in Maryland of the association, and I see the dollars that are being spent. Where does Weizmann's research? How is the research funded? Where are the are the funds and the proceeds that we're raising here in my area on a very small level, do they trickle and make their way to fund some of this research all the way in Israel?
To answer your question directly, the money that funds Weizmann comes from our international donor base. 20% of the budget comes from the Israeli government, and it used to be much higher years ago. But because they know that we're making money from technology transfer, from our endowment, the spend rate of about 4.5% of the endowment goes into the overall budget. To answer your question directly, the Alzheimer's Association, within the last 6 months, I'm going by memory, don't quote me to the exact date, has contributed to immunocheckpoint, to Michael Schwartz's work. Michael in Florida did address about 900 people about 2-3 years ago in Boca Raton at an Alzheimer's Association dinner. Actually, it was a luncheon in Boca West. And there are, I would have to say that the bulk of it is coming from global philanthropy, of which the American Committee produces a great portion of the monies for Weizmann research. There are great philanthropists in the world that know about Weizmann and have been contributing to it, and we're seeking more support all the time. Science is expensive. All of your major places in the U.S., Memorial Sloan Kettering, MD Anderson in Houston, they all have fundraising staffs to raise major dollars for these efforts. So science isn't cheap. When I look at what these microscopes cost today and some of the imaging machinery, they're millions and millions of dollars just for the equipment. Weizmann, though, does their equipment a little differently from U.S. labs. We have places on campus for imaging and nano-imaging, and the scientists will make appointments to use that equipment, and we have staff scientists who operate the equipment. So in the U.S., each lab may have their own special microscopes. At Weizmann, it's more of a collaborative, where they'll use the same equipment on appointment in the same building. So it's a little bit reduction of scale, so to speak, to keep the cost down. Israel is doing well, but it's not a country that has the capacity as the United States.
Sure.
Yeah. It was Chaim Weizmann's dream, and he said it in a speech in 1948 when they renamed the institute from the Daniel Seith Institute to the Chaim Weizmann Institute to the Weizmann Institute. That he said that we will not be able to be a country by exporting oranges and fruit. We don't have oil under the ground. What we're going to have to export is brain power. And he was prophetic then in 1948 and holds true today. I'd like to add in here that, and I don't want to be any by chance political, but around the time of the Abraham Accord, there was a deal signed by Mohammed bin Zayed University in the UAE and the Weizmann Institute to collaborate on artificial intelligence research. His Excellency Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jabbar met with Weizmann Institute President Alon Chen and signed an MOU in a virtual ceremony on September 12, 2020. The UAE has spent billions of dollars, literally billions with a B, on the most powerful supercomputers that are not only in the Middle East but also in Europe. And the Weizmann scientists will be able to, now they've gone, to go to the UAE and use their equipment, and in return, the best life science students at the UAE will be able to go to the Weizmann Institute and train in their fields there. And this is possible because at Weizmann, The language that is used to teach in the graduate school is English. English is the universal language of science. So I'm thinking about not only the economies of Israel, but as oil is going to be used less in the next 10, 15, 20 years, the countries there realize they have to switch to high-tech economies. And they're doing so. They see it coming. So I'm without being political, I don't want to talk about either political party. I'm hoping that people will make peace with each other to live in harmony. And I see that happening through science.
There's no doubt in my mind that the Weizmann Institute and other institutes like it does totally back the theory, that intelligence breeds benevolence. I'm one of those people that hope that I live long enough to, don't laugh now, to see alien life. I mean, to see it land, not to see it on the front of the Inquirer. And sometimes people go, how do you know it's going to be friendly? Well, I'm sure there's bad aliens and good aliens, but the odds are, if they had the scientific capabilities of getting here, my bet is, Vegas says, the odds are they're going to be peaceful, because intelligence breeds benevolence. And from what I can tell, right there in the Weizmann Institute, and again, I'm sure in institutes all over the planet.
One of the things you just led me into is the last thing I wanted to mention.
All right, do it. We got 5 minutes.
Well, one of the last things I wanted to mention is that at Weizmann, one of the great advances that they're looking to do is to build a new building to house 40 international neurobiology groups, to put all the people into one space where they can collaborate. And the other building they're building now is a project they're calling Frontiers of the Universe.
Yes.
And Weizmann, along with the European Space Agency, NASA, major industries in Israel, are building a microsatellite projected to launch in 2024 on a NASA rocket from Cape Canaveral. Will operate an ultraviolet light telescope designed to observe the universe in a way it's never been done before outside of the Earth's atmosphere. So instead of the satellite looking down at Earth, it's going to be looking out into the universe for planets and solar systems that can maintain life. So the question I'll leave you with is, are we alone in the universe?
I know we're not alone. I don't have to even come close to that question. That I know we're not alone.
Well, this is another flagship project of the Weizmann Institute going forward. There'll be high-energy particle physics learned from this, advanced physics technology, cosmology, extreme astrophysics. And as one of the science said to me, Richard, you're nothing but space dust. The evolution of our planet, all of the elements on our planet come from outer space. So he calls me space dust.
I don't know if John Gaston, who is the not only the producer of the show, but the founder of WeBeam TV, which I always have to say when I have an opportunity, just an incredible thing. Anybody who's thinking about a television show who thinks that may not be within your reach, and here we are talking to 100,000 people a week. I think maybe in our lifetime, with what you're explaining, WeBeam TV might have a totally different meaning. Rather than beaming you in like this, we'll just beam you in and you can sit next to me.
Well, I asked a physicist that, who's working on quantum computers that are no bigger than the key fob, that can send information on atoms at the speed of light. The speed of light, 187,000 miles a second. Think about how information is going to move. So maybe you'll be doing reverse mortgages in the UAE. I don't know.
Yeah. Can you imagine how much money we'll lend people, Stephen, when the average age is 120?
Unbelievable.
Well,
Yeah, the amateurization tables are going to have to be altered a
They're
little
going to be
bit.
very thick. Well, I know Gene Roddenberry is smiling wherever he is. Many people think Gene Roddenberry died. I just think he went back to the planet that he originally came from. But that's also a different show. We got a minute and a half left. Stephen, one more question.
Back to the question that I asked, and I don't think we got to it. So, is this more proactive
that's right.
Research, Richard, or are we talking the ability to reverse some of the symptoms of these terrible ailments?
Where they're going with the clinical trials, if the clinical trials are successful, then we'll be able to reverse it.
Oh, my God.
Well, I gave you a qualitative answer. The clinical trials will have to be successful. I've been involved since I've been at Weizmann, with knowing about clinical trials that worked and some that didn't work. So I'm qualifying the answer. There's a new drug that we're waiting for FDA approval now called Tucod. It's made from bacteria chlorophyll. It's
40
it's
seconds.
it's a drug that is curing prostate cancer without cutting you open.
Oh.
It's activated by fiber optic light. They're starting clinical trials at Memorial Sloan Kettering to try this method on pancreatic cancer.
Okay,
so we know it works on the prostate, but now they're going to try it somewhere else. So we're waiting for the FDA to give us approval to market this drug. It is approved in Europe by the EMA, and any of the countries in the European Union, you can get this treatment.
We have 5 seconds left. Thank you so much, both of you. Richard, you got to come on again soon. Thank you, everybody out there. Thank you both so much, Richard and Stephen.